Hello, welcome everyone to the Global Azure Bootcamp. Today I'm gonna be talking about building CICD pipelines for Kubernetes in Azure Pipelines. My name is Christian Melendez and I'm here to talk about Kubernetes, Cloud, and DevOps. You can find me on Twitter at ChristianHXC or at my blog post or my blog site at cmelendeztech.com. So I'm gonna be here talking about how to create a CI/CD pipeline using Azure Pipelines, and I'm gonna start by defining a few concepts that I believe are important to have in mind when you are creating a CI/CD pipeline. Then I will jump back to the demonstration that I have for you today. We're gonna be demonstrating how you can, from the developer perspective, interact with tools like this and how it looks like for you for a workflow on working locally, and then moving any change through the code in an automatic way to a different Kubernetes clusters in Azure. So let's get started. Let me start with the why of Kubernetes. I guess that you should be clear about why you're using Kubernetes, why are you planning to use Kubernetes, and if Kubernetes makes sense for you. I guess that every time that someone asks you why are you using Kubernetes, you should be able to answer that question. I'm gonna use this quote from Kelsey Hightower, which says, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. It's a better place to start, not the end game. So by saying this, what I would suggest is that try not to configure or install Kubernetes by your own. Try to leverage on the cloud or in the cloud providers that have the solutions, managed solutions for you. Because Kubernetes is just a baseline, just a platform, so that you can build things on top of Kubernetes. You don't have to worry about the architecture, even though it is important to understand the architecture. You don't have to deal with that by managing that by your own, unless you are providing something that that you have to where you have to take care of a lot of things. But I believe that the majority of us are not in that marketplace. So the why of Kubernetes is because also you have highly available architectures built in. You can have a lot of from the master perspective and from the worker perspective, HA. I'm not gonna dive into that many details on Kubernetes because I'm assuming that you already have some knowledge of Kubernetes. I just want to highlight the benefits and why the industry is using Kubernetes a lot and talking about Kubernetes a lot. So the why of Kubernetes is because you can have HA from the master nodes, meaning that if a master node goes down, you can continue working with two master nodes that will be scheduling containers. It will be continue scheduling pods for your application, and you don't have to worry about that. But also you have HA from the worker perspective, which means the from your application perspective, where you can have multiple nodes to host your application, your container applications. So basically you will have all of that. In managed services like the ones from Azure for Kubernetes, you don't have to worry about the master nodes. Azure will manage that for you for free. You just have to create a cluster, and that will be it. I'm gonna demonstrate how to create that really fast. But I already have 3 clusters built in that I'm gonna be using to deploy the same application that I'm deploying locally. So you have, you only have to configure which VM type to use for your worker nodes, and that will be it. You can configure then how they will be scaling, policies, so that scaling policies that you can configure and define. based on the load for your application, based on how many resources your application and containers are using. So it is gonna be pretty a lot of the things that the cloud has bring to us in traditional workloads for traditional application workloads is that you will have the scalability of the cloud and automated self-healing and things like that. But Kubernetes already is like a layer on top of that is leveraging on the cloud to provide you that for your application that is already built in, so you don't have to worry about that, and you will be to say it in a way, you will be applying the good practices from the industry to build highly available and scalable applications in the cloud. The capabilities with Kubernetes that you will have is that you can have something like this. You can do safe deployments, smoother deployments. Every time that you are deploying a change, you can test that part before going live to the 100% of the traffic for your application. And this is basically how Facebook does deployments. I found this methodology in the DevOps handbook, where they talk about how Facebook does deployments. And I think that and when I found this image, I was thinking about, wow, with Kubernetes you can apply those same principles very easily and do deployments safely. So basically what you will have is that you can pretty easily configure your application changes to be deployed into internal users. That will be another service in Kubernetes, or you can have 5% traffic of your service for your free users. The canary for free users will be receiving that traffic, will be using that new version that you already approved in the internal phase for your application. When you are okay with that change, you can promote that change to the canary paid version, but you're gonna be promoting that for to be used only for 5% of your users. You can test that part with real traffic, with real information, with production in a production environment, and you can spot any problems and if you have any, luckily the idea is that you don't have, but if you happen to have any problem there, you can roll back very easily, and only 5% of your users will notice it. They will be saying like, oh, maybe it was my internet, something was failing here, maybe it was cache or something like that, but only 5% of your users will be seeing that failure, so you can roll back very easily. But if not, if you are okay with that change, you can promote that change to the rest of the you can roll out that change for the 100% of your users, and then you will be receiving all traffic, but you already have that confidence that you already tested that application change previously, not just in another environment, but also with real live users. And again, you can roll back very easily and very rapidly if you want, because you will have maybe you will find something when you have everyone using your application changes. But anyway, the point is that with Kubernetes you can easily do rollout or rollback by using the same command and the same application changes that you were using before, or that you are planning to use in the future. So the second part of this talk is about CICD in Kubernetes, and how is that different? Is it really different? Does the CICD principles apply for Kubernetes? Are we gonna be using something different? We're gonna find out that in reality not. We're not gonna be using any sort of special CICD principles applied to Kubernetes. It's just basically the other way around. It is how we can apply the principles or the good practices for CICD that you can find in the continuous delivery book, the Phoenix project, the DevOps handbook. But again, I'm just gonna talk about a few techniques or a few tips that I think that are valuable for to consider in a CI/CD pipeline that you can also apply in Kubernetes. So let's get started. To make deployments smoother, you will have to automate as much as possible, and with Kubernetes that is doable, that is possible. Again, I must confess that initially you will have to learn about how Kubernetes work, how to configure your services with Kubernetes, and the learning curve could be overwhelmed, but don't get stressed. You can start little by little, and the idea is that you can automate as much as possible, and if not, you can. It's okay to have manual things, but you can remember that this is about continuously improving. You can start doing small things, automating small things, and little by little identify if you need to keep adding automation in that part. But it's just, it is a process. It is a continuous journey. It is not like an end goal. Build and pack your application only once, and with containers and Kubernetes, this makes sense. This is already built in. And you will notice how we can apply this and how we can configure this in Azure Pipelines. The idea also is that you can deploy the same way all the time, and with Kubernetes that is also possible, because the idea is that you can deploy to any environment and do not treat production as special. Like if you are gonna be, oh my god, we're gonna be doing in production differently because production is production, nothing is like production, which I agree. But the idea is that you can do the in the same way the deployments that you do for production, for development, for testing. I'm not saying that you will have for development the same infrastructure that you will have for production, because again, nothing compares to production. But the idea is that you can do deployments in the same way. That is gonna make sense. Makes more sense when when you are seeing how to build these CICD pipelines. Also, deploying small batches and do it often, even if you don't have finished any change. The idea is that you can practice this task of doing deployments in small batches. And what if you haven't finished any change? Your change. You can use techniques like feature flags, where you can feature an uncompleted task or a feature of your application off. And that will be the default, but again, we can talk about more that feature flags, and you can find more information on my blog about that topic. Choose a zero downtime strategy, like the one that I was talking about before when I was talking about the why of Kubernetes. So you can have blue-green deployments, the canary releases, all those strategies that will help you to make deployments smoother are already built in Kubernetes. You just have to use it. And learn how to use it. Trunk-based development, which nowadays will be master branch development, which basically this is again, you can find more about this topic in the DevOps handbook and also in my blog. But what basically means is that you will be using feature flags, but only temporary, that will be living only for the day. When you are finished with your code, or finished with the day, you can merge back to master branch those changes and turn on or off that feature, for example. But the idea is that you have only all the time something ready to release, because the idea is that you can deploy in small batches and constantly, right? So again, we can talk about that more later, but I'm gonna demonstrate that in a moment here. Work with environment variables, which is this is basically from the 12-factor app framework, that you can find more information about that. But basically, this is the answer to the question on how to do deployment in the same way all the time in different environments. You will be building an artifact that you can easily change the configuration for that artifact to behave differently in every environment. So again, the Kubernetes workflow should be as easy as this. I understand and I'm aware that most of the time it is not like this, but the idea is that, or the end goal is that you can have something like this. There are tools, there are services from Kubernetes that you can leverage on to have a pipeline or a workflow that looks like this. Because the idea is that you can have everything defined as code through YAML, through Docker files or to whatever tool you're using to automate deployments. But the idea is that you have everything, the final source of truth in the code. So the process will be like Docker build. Once you have image built in or a compiled image built in for your application, you will be pushing that image to the Docker registry. That could be Docker Hub or the Azure Container Registry or whatever. The idea is that you have a place where you can store those images. So then you will be applying the deployment, the service definition, the application definition through YAML for Kubernetes, and it will be as simple as kubectl apply. And that's it. That's as simple as that should be the Kubernetes workflow for your applications. So the last part that I want to talk about in this talk is about Azure Pipelines and how can we create CI/CD pipelines for Kubernetes with this service from Azure or with this tool, right? So basically, Azure Pipelines is the part from Azure DevOps that you can be using only for building your application and releasing the application, either if it's in Azure or if it's in any other place or on premises or any other cloud provider. Azure Pipelines can be used for that, and it's free. I'm gonna for up to 5 users, and if it's for open source projects. But again, I'm not gonna deep dive on the pricing because it's quite difficult or quite complex to explain. But again, I'm gonna be using that part. I'm gonna be using Azure Pipelines without paying a penny right now. So the workflow in Azure Pipelines is like this. Basically, you will be the user will be creating a deployment request that can or cannot have a pre-deployment approval. You can have gates here, and that will be queued. That process will be queued in the Azure Pipeline service, which basically an agent in step 3 will pull and pick up a pending jump from the service. And the next step is that the agent will download the artifacts from the server. That could mean that it will be downloaded the code, or if the process is to build the artifact, or it can be downloading the artifacts if the process is to release the application. So the sixth stage is about the 5th stage, sorry, is about automating that process through an agent. You can use the agent from the managed by Azure, or you can have your self-hosted agent, which I would recommend you to do it because it's gonna be faster. You don't have to wait a lot of time in the queue, and you can leverage on. You can continue using the cache for the Docker images that you will have for your application. So the next step will be that the agent will be pushing logs to the service, because remember, this is how valuable will be for your developers and for your operators to have a good quality feedback of the pipeline if you want to improve the process. So the final step will be triggering the next stage, and before doing that, you can have a plus deployment approval. For, let's say that for development you don't need any approval, but for and neither for testing, but for production you need someone for compliance purposes, someone to accept that deployment and say that I approve this change. But just for compliance purposes. You can automate the rest of the pipeline and then execute that release to the production environment. And that will be it. And that's basically the workflow in Azure Pipelines. How you will create these definitions through the UI, it will be like editing the code, push the code to repository, and then create the continuous integration pipelines in the UI by creating building tasks, test tasks, and things like that. Then that phase will be creating the artifact, which then will be about doing the continuous delivery part or continuous deployment part for releasing the application to any target. That could be to testing, to development, to staging, or to production. But the idea is that you're going to be building only once your applications in the continuous integration part or stage, or the build stage that we're gonna take a look to in a moment. But if you want to define your the same process through YAML, through code, the process will be simpler and you will have more visibility for your team because everyone that has access to the repository will be able to take a look to that or modify, and you can still using like pull request to approve changes, protect master branches and things like that. So you will be editing the code, editing the YAML file definition, and again you will be pushing that code to a repository, which then Azure Pipelines will pull that change and deploy to the target. Why is that simple? Because you already have that definition that you have here through YAML definition. But I must say that you only have this YAML pipeline definition for the building part. Azure is working on the release definition through YAML because that is much more complicated than building an application. So they're working on that, but it's coming in the roadmap. You can take a look to that roadmap in the GitHub repository that they have for that, so you can see when they are planning to have that ready. This is how it looks like, the YAML definition for the build part for a Docker application, which basically it's gonna be about building push to a Docker image. We're gonna take a look to that later. If you want to have more examples on how to create Azure pipelines through YAML, there's a GitHub repository that you can use, and you can find templates there that are not just for Docker, but also for building Java application, Node.js application, or .NET application. So it is not just for Docker. I'm just using this because for me, I have expertise on Docker and Kubernetes, and I wanted to highlight those features of these technologies so that you can see how you can apply the continuous delivery principles into this type of technologies. So no more slides. Finally, I'm gonna jump back to the demo that I have ready for you, where I'm gonna demonstrate how to develop locally a change, how to test that change locally as a good developer, and then I'm gonna configure with you from scratch the pipeline in Azure Pipeline, so you can practice this at your leisure. So I'm gonna also be sharing the code. Everything is in my GitHub account, so you can take a look to that later. So this is the application that I have ready for you. This is an application that I created with the .NET Core CLI, which is basically using the Razor template. It has nothing special here. I added a Docker file definition that again you can find in the official docs, either from Docker or from Microsoft, where you can have this already built in. If you are using Visual Studio, I'm using Visual Studio code, but if you're using Visual Studio, you can just add Docker support, and that will be created automatically here. So yeah, basically that's it. What I'm going to do here right now is to create something here, a change here that it says, instead of Kubernetes, it will say something like K8s, and I will save that part, and you can see how easy is to build that part with Docker. So I'm gonna use this command, the docker build command, and it looks like it's not doing any change because it's not taking any change here. So I'm gonna here Kubernetes demo here, I'm gonna change it here, I'm gonna build that part again, and yep, this looks like it is like a significant change for the application. So it is building the application again, and I'm using Docker for Mac here, and you can see here in the screen that I have already Kubernetes configured here. When you are using Docker for Mac or for Windows, you can just let me just demonstrate that part. Preferences, you can just enable that part here, and it will be like enable Kubernetes, and that will take a moment, and you have everything you need there. So it will be as simple as that. So now let me run that application locally that I just built, and you will see that my application now says Kubernetes, which it was what I had running. Now it says Kubernetes demo. So I'm gonna refresh that here, and well, the change is there, so you can see that it's working. So you will be saying, okay, let's do the push. So it will be Docker push my image, and it will be pushing that image to the Docker Hub. I'm using Docker Hub right now for demo purposes. And you can see that in Docker Hub, I have that image here, the latest one, which is gonna be saying last updated a few seconds ago. So I have ready that ready, and I'm gonna deploy to Kubernetes locally. So it will be as simple as kubectl hype f, and I'm gonna use the deployment definition that I have here, which is nothing more than Kubernetes. It is this is how you define the namespaces, the deployment, and the services. So you can see that I'm using a namespace here. I'm gonna explain that a little bit why I'm using that. You also have the deployment part here, where you say that you want to have 3 replicas of this pod, and it is gonna be using this image. This is only for locally purposes. I'm using latest, but a good practice is to not use latest for Docker. The idea is that you can have this as image as number versions, as I have here. You can see that I have different versions here, but for dev purposes that is okay, because in the automated way of creating these images with Azure Pipelines, I'm gonna be changing this here. So I'm gonna apply this YAML definition to my local instance of Kubernetes, and you can see that is not working because I have something here. Okay, kubectl. Oh, I'm sorry. You have to say apply -f .net and deployment. You can see that is created, and remember that I created a namespace CVC or service master, right? So I'm gonna use this here, get o -m svc master, and you can see that it created the pods. It created the load balancer, which is gonna be locally. That's why the external host is has localhost. So when I go back here to localhost and I just use this, you can see that I have my application running. So I have that running, and now that I'm ready for that, I'm gonna well, if I want to do that here in another Kubernetes cluster that is in the cloud, I will have to run this same command again, the kubectl apply, for that YAML definition. But I'm not gonna do that first because I don't have a cluster. Well, I do have a cluster, actually 3 clusters for Kubernetes, but I want to demonstrate you how easy it is to create one in Azure. So you can have something here like add a new Kubernetes service. You will be defining here. I already have a detailed blog post of this, a detailed guide on how to create a cluster in Azure for Kubernetes, which you can take a look to my blog at my blog. But it is as easy as this. You will be configuring the basic, the name of the cluster, the region, the node size, the worker nodes, how many you want, the authentication part, the networking part, the monitoring part, and that will be it. It will be take like 10-15 minutes right now. I guess that Azure is working on reducing that time. I'm not sure right now, but I guess that it's taking like in average 8 minutes, but there are some times where it takes 10 or 15 minutes. But anyway, I have 3 environments: development, testing, and production, and I'm gonna configure here in Azure pipelines this pipeline or this project. I don't want to do that here because I want to start creating that part automatically. So I'm gonna go here back to my devazure.com account, and I'm gonna create here a new project, which is gonna be Global Azure Bootcamp Online. And I want to have it here private just because I don't know, I just want to have it right now as it is. So I'm gonna go with the defaults, and I'm just gonna be creating that part, and that's it. I have nothing here, as you can see. Oh well, I typed this wrong, which is says online, but I know you get the idea. So I'm gonna go here with pipelines. I'm gonna go to build, and I'm gonna be creating a new pipeline. This is gonna be like the first thing that you will need to do manually. So I'm gonna be using GitHub, and I'm gonna be using here my GitHub account, and you can see that I'm gonna authorize that part, and that's it. So I have now the repository, which is Azure DevOps Kubernetes. You can find that here in my repository, Azure DevOps Kubernetes. So I have now to choose the master branch because I want to do master branch development, right? So I'm gonna click here to continue, and I'm gonna specify that I want to use configuration as code, because if not, I will have to create that manually, but I already have this defined. You can find it here in the .NET build YAML, which I demonstrated in the slides, and you can take a look to that later in a moment. But basically what it does is that is doing the Docker build, the Docker login, and the Docker push. It will be pushing that part. So I'm gonna do that here in the YAML definition, and I'm gonna apply, and then I'm gonna configure here the agent, which is gonna be an agent that has the agent installed from Azure DevOps in my account to speed up the process. You're gonna understand why in a moment. So I'm gonna click here in the 3 dots here. I'm gonna choose the .NET App Build, and I'm gonna save it here, and then I'm gonna go to here to the variables, and I'm gonna be using 2 variables here. You can see here that I'm using the Docker ID, and I'm gonna be adding that here, which is gonna be my username in the Docker hub, and I'm also using the Docker password, which is gonna be used for login. I'm gonna pause the video now because I'm gonna type my password, but then I'm gonna click here and type it as a secret, so no one can see my password anymore. And that's it. You have everything here or that I needed. So I'm gonna save it here again, and I'm gonna wait a little bit, and that's it. So let's go to pipelines here, and you can see that nothing is running here. So now I'm gonna jump back to the code, and I'm gonna push that change. So I'm gonna say new change the Kubernetes text. So I'm gonna click here, then I'm gonna push that change there, and it's gonna be finishing in a moment here. And that's it. So we can go back here and see that in the commits here, it's gonna be here last commit 23 seconds ago, change the Kubernetes text. So then I'm gonna go jump back here and go to the pipelines, and you can see that this already trigger automatically. So I can see here the logs from the agent that is running here in my account in Azure, and you can see that is a self-hosted agent. And because this is the first time that I'm running this, it's gonna take a few moments to finish this. So I'm gonna pause the video here, and I'm gonna continue here later. So you can see here that it's pulling the all the artifacts or everything that the job needs to run. And you can see the logs here. It's been 15 minutes from now. The checkout finished, and the command line process is running right now. Basically, I have everything here like a bash, in a bash way. But again, you can use other tools like Ansible, Terraform, or things like that. But I just wanted to keep that simple. So it's finishing this part. It's not taking that much time, and it's pushing that image to the Docker registry. So you can see that it published the artifacts and finished, and it finished successfully. So if you go back here, you can see that there's a few seconds ago an image here. See, so it worked. I already have here any change that I do here through the code, and I push that automatically. To the master branch, it will be automatically triggered by this part. But I haven't finished yet here. I need to deploy here to the these three environments. So I'm gonna jump back here. This is gonna be the build definition, and I'm gonna do this only once. So I'm gonna go here to the to the releases section, and I'm gonna create a new pipeline. So I want to say that this is an empty job, and this is I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna use here the user interface, because remember that I said before that the YAML definition is not supported yet for the release part. So I'm gonna here define this stage as a development, and the stage owner gonna add me. So I'm gonna save it here, and it's one job and 0 tasks. And I'm gonna define again the agent that I have built in my application. So I'm gonna save it here. So now I'm gonna add the task for Kubernetes to deploy to Kubernetes, and I'm gonna click here deploy to Kubernetes, because this is already something that Azure has built in for me just to use. And I'm gonna use here Azure Resource Manager, and I'm gonna choose my Azure subscription, which I have to authorize previously. And then I'm gonna choose my resource group, and I'm gonna choose the Kubernetes cluster. So I'm gonna choose here development, and I won't configure anything else, just these few other things, which is gonna be the apply command, and then I'm gonna use this configuration. But you can see that there is nothing here. So what I'm gonna do here is that I missed a step here, and I'm gonna go back here to the pipeline part, and I didn't add an artifact. So the artifact will be the artifact that I have from the project that I just created, and I'm gonna use this one, because the artifacts, it's gonna be the way that Azure will communicate from builds to releases. What will have the artifact? Well, the artifact will produce this YAML definition, this deployment YAML definition, but it will be replacing the latest part. You remember that one of the commands that I have here in the build is a set command, which basically replaces the simple latest with the image name to the .NET deployment app. And when I'm publishing the artifacts, it's gonna be included in the artifacts this YAML definition with the new image name for that build definition. So I'm gonna go here, click, and Azure Pipelines, and I already have here, and I'm gonna continue configuring this in the development, for doing the deployment. And when I click here in the file, selecting the file, and I'm gonna see the artifact, and I'm gonna see the deployment YAML. So I'm gonna choose it here, and I'm gonna leave it here, and that will be it. I have to do nothing else. It will be basically running the kubectl apply to this file. The same thing that I did when I was running this locally. And I'm gonna click here Kubernetes app, for example. And I'm gonna click here, and I'm gonna click save. And then what I'm gonna do here is that I'm gonna create a release because I did this manually, and I'm gonna click here deployment development, and I'm gonna choose the artifact. And this is where things get really interesting, because I can roll back here and choose another artifact, but it will be doing another release, right? So you can see here that it is gonna be running, and I'm gonna click here and deploy. I mean, this is manually, but I can configure this automatically, which I'm gonna be doing later. And it's in progress. I can view the logs here, and you can see that it do things, I mean, pretty fast. Same command that I'm running here locally is the same command that is running there. So I'm gonna, it finished. Now I'm gonna connect here to my Docker, to my Kubernetes cluster for development. And I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna click here, view Kubernetes dashboard. I'm not gonna do that, but I'm gonna just use this command to download the credentials in Azure, because I'm running the Cloud Shell here. And I'm gonna run here get service namespace. Remember that I'm using that namespace master. And you can see here that it's gonna return the public IP address. And just so that you can see that it's working, I'm gonna choose this here, the pods. You can see that the pods has been already deployed here, and you can see here that I'm gonna test this IP address. This is in development, right? So you can see that it has the Kubernetes demo. It is working, and just because I know that you might think that I already have this plan, I'm gonna I'm gonna connect here to the testing cluster. So I'm gonna jump back here, and I'm gonna run the same command, so that you can see that I'm gonna be the pods that I'm running here. The age is, well, it's like a month, right? I haven't been doing things for a while here. So I'm gonna go here and see the external IP address for the testing environment, and I'm gonna click here. I'm not sure if I copied that correctly, so I'm gonna copy that again. And you can see that I don't have this here. I have something completely different here. I don't have this here running in a testing environment. So now what I'm gonna do is that this is where things get interesting, because I'm gonna be creating the pipeline. So I'm gonna be using here deploy to a Kubernetes cluster again, and I'm gonna say here testing, and that's it. So I'm gonna click here, and I'm gonna add here. I'm gonna make sure that it is using the default the agent that I'm using, just to speed up the process. And then I'm gonna configure here the kubectl deploy to Kubernetes. I guess that is using here something different. So I'm gonna remove this here, and I'm gonna add here Kubernetes deploy to Kubernetes. Okay, the service connection, and okay, I'm gonna use again our Azure Resource Manager. I'm gonna use the connection here to my subscription. I'm gonna use the same resource group, but now I'm gonna use this testing cluster. So I'm gonna click here apply, and I'm gonna use this configuration file path, and again, same thing that I did for development, right? I'm doing the same thing for this environment. So I'm gonna just save here. And just so that you can see, to speed up the demo, I'm gonna create the other pipeline that I have here. Go back to the releases here, and I'm gonna add the other phase that I have for production. So I'm gonna choose here an empty job, and I'm gonna call here production, and I'm gonna close here. and I'm gonna make sure that it has the agent that I have there. Now I'm gonna choose Kubernetes, and I'm gonna click here, and the same, right? I'm gonna use Azure Resource Manager, the subscription, and I'm gonna add the choose the resource group, the cluster, which is gonna be production, and I'm gonna use the apply command, and I'm gonna using the configuration. So I'm gonna be doing the same thing again, the same for dev, the same for testing, and the same for production. So I have here this. So what I want you to notice is that for the pipeline, I can add something here. This is the after stage, for example, after stage for production 2. But the difference is that I can activate pre-deployment approval. So I can add here like myself. I'm not sure if I'm gonna appear here. Yep. So I can configure things like the timeline, like the timeout. If after 30 days I haven't approved this, it will be expiring, or things like that. Or you can configure other things here for the deployment approval. So I'm gonna save here, and I'm gonna click here. And what I'm gonna do now is that I'm gonna create another change so that you can see that how it works here. So again, the workflow is like this, right? I'm gonna remove here things, and welcome to Gov Online. So I'm gonna choose here, and I'm gonna again run things locally and build, for example. And you can see that it's gonna be building that part, the same process again. I'm gonna test that part locally so that I can see, so that I can verify that it's working correctly on my machine. So I'm gonna run again this locally, and this is localhost, and you can see that it's working. Welcome to Gov Online, and it says only Kubernetes, but for my version of Kubernetes, it has nothing there. The change is not there, and neither in development or testing, right? Well, testing is worse. So I'm gonna close here, and because now I'm happy with that, I'm gonna push here. This could be my development or my own account of the Docker registry that no one else is using, and I just decided to use this for my local environment. So it is pushed, and then I'm gonna test this part again. kubectl apply f.net deployment. So you can see that the master was configured, the deployment unchanged, and the deployment unchanged. Why? Because I didn't change the image, but because I have this as always image pool policy, you can see that I have here kubectl get pods. I have to look, because I have to do that locally. I have to run this command, which basically I'm deleting the deployment, the namespace or the service, and that's it. So it is running here, and in my local machine it should be working right now. Kubernetes welcome to Gov Online. So I have these things locally. So I'm gonna push this a new change in the repo. So I'm gonna push that change to the repository. Oh yeah, but push here. It's gonna take a few seconds here to finish, and then the pipeline will trigger automatically. And then I'm gonna be pushing that through testing to development and to testing automatically. And you can see here that it's not gonna take that much time. We're gonna go back to builds here. And a new change in the repo, it's already in the queue being built, and I can click here, and you can see that it finished, and it's running the command line. It's doing the same process again, but I can configure this here to push the image to the official registry and not to my personal registry, for example. And you can see that it didn't take that much time because it already has the images there downloaded to the agent, and it finished. It only took 32 seconds. Now if I go to the releases part, and it's gonna be triggered in a moment here, because I remember that I have here this automatically, right? Oh no, I didn't have this. So the continuous deployment trigger is disabled, so I'm gonna have to save that here. And just for demo purposes, I'm gonna pause the video. I'm gonna do it a new change again. So I already pushed something here, and I'm gonna go back to the build, and you see that I added a new change here, added Azure Pipelines text. So what I basically did is that I added Azure Pipelines here to this text, and you can see that it's gonna be finishing here in a sec, 33 seconds again. And if I go back to the releases, I'm gonna see here in a moment a new trigger. Okay, release 2, it's working, and you can see that is being triggered automatically. And you can see the other three, the other phases here that change in this case. And the deployment, it's gonna be triggered automatically. And the deployment part already finished. It was really fast. And if I go back to the testing part, to the testing stage, you can see that it's doing the same things again to the same in the same way, but to a different environment. And if I go back here to the this is the development cluster, right? If I go back here and I update here, you can see that the new changes here, Gov, Online, Azure Pipelines, Kubernetes, and I can go back here to testing, and you can see that the new change is already there, but not in production. Let's just go back to production here and connect here so that you can see that after I approve that change for production, a new change will be there here, will be there. So if I go back here and I get the IP address for that service, and I test that part here, you can see that nothing is there. But when I click here in approve, this is already assigned for me, but that could be assigned to someone else. But if I go here, approve, I approve, it looks good, good. And approving, so you can see that it's gonna be in progress here, and it's gonna be working. So I'm gonna see here that it's gonna be finishing in a few seconds here, and you're gonna see that it took only a few seconds to do that the release. So I'm gonna click here again with bots, and you will see that the canary it's being executed. So the container creating, it's has the age of those containers has changed. You can see that this is already changing, and it's being deployed. And you can see here that if I go back to production, it should be working, and it works. So that's basically it. That's how you create a CI/CD pipeline, and I demonstrated here to you how it looks like when you have this running for automatically for different environments, and also adding a deployment gate for production. So let's go back here, and to close things, I want to thank you for paying attention all this time, and also for the organizers. And if you have any question, you can find me again at Twitter, or you can subscribe to the my email list in my blog post, where you can always find my new entries there that I write constantly. So talk to you later. Bye.